The sun was bright in the sky over London that May morning. A big day had come for the royal family. People from all over the world filled the streets. Some had been waiting since the night before. They wanted to see the royal family up close. This was a day that would go into history books. The air felt alive with hope and joy. It was early morning at Kensington Palace. The staff moved quickly through halls. They carried fresh flowers and pressed clothes. Today was not just any day. It was the day of King Charles's coronation, and Prince William and his family would play a big role. William stood in his room. He looked at himself in the mirror. His royal uniform fit him well. The red fabric was bright against the gold buttons. His medals from his years of service hung on his chest. He ran his hand through his hair one more time. Being next in line to the throne felt heavy today. He took a deep breath. In another room, Kate was already dressed. Her blue dress was the color of the sky. It had small jewels that caught the light when she moved. She wore a small tiara that had once belonged to Princess Diana. Kate knew all eyes would be on her family today. She wanted everything to be perfect. She went to check on the children. Prince George was 9 years old now. He stood tall in his small suit. He looked so much like his father. Kate smiled at him. George knew that one day he would be king. Even at his young age, he took his royal duties very seriously. Princess Charlotte was sitting still while a helper fixed her hair. She was 7 years old. Her dress matched her mother's in a lighter shade of blue. Charlotte had a ribbon in her hair and small white gloves on her hands. She was always careful to do things right. People often said she reminded them of her great-grandmother, the late Queen. Then there was 5-year-old Prince Louis. He was jumping on his bed. His small suit jacket was still open. One of his shoes was missing. Kate laughed and went to him. She helped him put on his shoe and fixed his jacket. Louis had a big smile that could win over any crowd. He was full of life and often stole the show at royal events. "Remember what we talked about," Kate said to Louis. "Today is a big day for Grandpa. We need to be on our best behavior." Louis nodded. "I promised to be good, but can I still wave to the people?" "Of course you can wave," Kate said with a smile. "The people love to see you wave." A knock came at the door. A palace worker told them the cars were ready. It was time to go. William joined his family in the hall. He looked at Kate and the children with pride in his eyes. "You all look wonderful," he said. "Ready for the big day?" The children nodded. Even Louis stood up straight now. William bent down to speak to his children. "Today we will see Grandpa become king. There will be lots of people watching. Remember to smile and wave. And if you get tired, just look at Mummy or me. We will be right there with you." The family walked through the palace halls. Workers bowed or curtsied as they passed. The red carpet under their feet led them to the main doors. Outside, royal guards stood at attention. The black cars waited with their flags flying. William took Kate's hand. They shared a look that said more than words could. They had been through so much together. Now they would face this historic day as a team. "Let's make Grandpa proud," William said to his family. They stepped out into the morning light. Camera flashes went off like stars. The journey to Westminster Abbey was about to begin. The world was waiting to see the future of the royal family. And what a sight they would be. The royal cars moved slowly through the London streets. Inside the first car, William looked out at the crowds. Thousands of people lined the road. They waved flags and held up signs. Some had camped out for days just to get a good spot. William felt a mix of pride and duty wash over him. Kate sat beside him. She reached over and fixed his collar. It was already perfect, but this small act helped calm both of them. They had been through many big events before, but a coronation was rare. The last one had been over 70 years ago, when Queen Elizabeth became queen. "Look at all the people," Prince George said. He sat across from his parents. His hands were folded neatly in his lap. George was trying hard to look grown up, but his eyes were wide with wonder. Princess Charlotte sat next to her brother. She waved at the crowds through the window. Her waves were perfect. Not too fast, and not too slow. She had practiced this many times. Charlotte loved these big royal events. She knew just what to do. Prince Louis was bouncing in his seat. He pressed his face against the window. His breath made small clouds on the glass. Louis pointed at everything he saw. The guards on horses, the big red buses, the flags that hung from buildings. "Will I get to wear a crown too?" Louis asked. William smiled at his youngest son. "Not today, Louis. Today is Grandpa's big day. He will wear the crown. But maybe one day you can try on a small one," Kate added with a wink. This made Louis smile from ear to ear. The car turned onto the Mall. This was the famous road that led to Buckingham Palace. Today it was decorated with flags from all the countries that had the king as their head of state. The road looked like a river of red, white, and blue. A line of royal guards stood on both sides of the road. They wore bright red coats and tall black bearskin hats. They stood very still like statues. Louis wanted to wave at them, but George told him the guards were not allowed to wave back. As they got closer to Westminster Abbey, the crowds grew bigger. People cheered when they saw the royal car. Some had small screens to take pictures. Others had brought chairs and food for the long wait. Inside the car, William took a deep breath. He turned to his family. "Remember what we talked about," he said. "Today we will walk in as a family. We will show everyone that the royal family is strong and united." Kate nodded. She checked the children one last time. She fixed George's tie. She made sure Charlotte's hair ribbon was straight. She wiped a small smudge from Louis's cheek. Everything had to be perfect. The car slowed down as it reached the Abbey. This building was over 1,000 years old. Kings and queens have been crowned here for centuries. Today it would be Charles's turn. The Abbey looked grand with its tall towers and stone walls. Outside, reporters from around the world waited with cameras. TV crews had set up to show the event to millions of people. Police officers kept the crowds back. The driver opened the car door. William stepped out first. The sunlight made his medals shine. A cheer went up from the crowds. He turned and offered his hand to Kate. She stepped out with grace. Her blue dress seemed to glow in the sunlight. Then it was time for the children. George came out first. He stood tall and straight. He gave a small nod to the crowds. Charlotte followed with a perfect small curtsy that made people smile. Then came Louis. He jumped out with energy and waved with both hands. His big smile made everyone laugh. The family stood together at the entrance to the Abbey. They made a perfect picture. William and Kate stood proud with their 3 children. The future of the royal family was on display for the world to see. Inside the Abbey, family members and important guests were already seated. The music had started to play. It was almost time for the ceremony to begin. The family took one last moment together before stepping inside. "Ready?" William asked. The children nodded. It was time to go in and see Grandpa become king. The heavy doors of Westminster Abbey opened wide. A rush of cool air met the family as they stood at the entrance. Inside, the ancient building was filled with flowers and lights. The stone walls seemed to hold the weight of history. Music from the choir filled every corner. William and Kate walked in first. They moved with perfect timing. Not too fast, not too slow. Years of royal duties had taught them how to walk for these big events. The children followed close behind. George and Charlotte remembered their training. They kept their backs straight and their eyes forward. Louis tried his best to copy his older siblings. Hundreds of people sat in rows inside the Abbey. They all stood as the family entered. Kings and queens from other countries were there. So were prime ministers and presidents. Famous actors and sports stars sat in the back rows. All of them turned to watch William, Kate, and the children. The family walked down the long center aisle. The red carpet felt soft under their feet. Flowers lined the path. The smell of roses and lilies filled the air. High above, The colored glass windows let in streams of light that danced on the stone floor. William spotted his father at the front of the abbey. Charles stood tall in his royal robes. Soon he would sit in the ancient wooden throne and be crowned king. William felt a swell of pride. His father had waited many years for this day. Kate noticed that Louis was starting to look around too much. She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. This was her signal to remind him to focus. Louis looked up at his mother and smiled. He tried to stand taller like his brother. They reached their seats in the front row. These special chairs had been placed just for them. They had red cushions and the royal coat of arms on the back. William and Kate sat down with the children between them. From here, they could see everything that would happen. The grand organ began to play. The sound was so deep it seemed to shake the whole building. More people walked in. Bishops in white robes, guards in bright uniforms, ladies carrying the things needed for the ceremony. The crown itself came last. It sat on a red pillow and sparkled with jewels. Charlotte leaned over to George. "The crown is so pretty," she whispered. George nodded. He knew that crown would be his someday, many years from now. Louis watched with big eyes. He had never seen anything like this before. All the colors and sounds were new to him. He wanted to ask questions, but he remembered his promise to be quiet. Instead, he held tight to Kate's hand. The Archbishop of Canterbury walked to the center. He wore special robes for this day. His voice was strong as he welcomed everyone. The ceremony was about to begin. William felt a tap on his arm. It was George. "Dad," George whispered, "when will Grandpa sit on the throne?" "Soon," William said softly. "First, there will be some talking and singing. Then Grandpa will make his promises to the people. Then he will sit on the throne and receive the crown." George nodded. He wanted to remember every part of this day. Someday he would tell his own children about it. Kate noticed that Charlotte was sitting extra still. She knew her daughter was trying to be perfect. Kate gave her a warm smile. Charlotte smiled back, her shoulders relaxing a little. The choir began to sing. Their voices rose up to the high ceiling. The sound was beautiful. Even Louis stopped fidgeting to listen. The song was very old. It had been sung at coronations for hundreds of years. A hush fell over the crowd as Charles stood up. He walked toward the throne. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. William felt Kate reach for his hand. They shared a look. This was not just about Charles becoming king. It was about their family and their future too. The children watched their grandfather with wide eyes. Today they were seeing history happen right in front of them. Years from now, people would ask them what it was like to be there. As the Archbishop raised the crown high for all to see, the sunlight caught its jewels. For a moment, the whole abbey seemed to fill with colorful light. The crown was placed on Charles's head. A cheer went up inside Westminster Abbey. William and Kate joined in the clapping. The children copied their parents. Even Louis clapped his small hands together with excitement. This was the big moment they had all been waiting for. William felt a strange mix of feelings. He was happy for his father. Charles had waited so long for this day. But William also knew that when a new king is crowned, it means the old queen is gone. He still missed his grandmother. He thought about how proud she would be of his father today. Kate watched her husband closely. She could tell he was thinking of Queen Elizabeth. She reached over and touched his hand. No words were needed. They had been together long enough to understand each other without speaking. The choir sang again. The sound filled the large space. Louis started to swing his legs under his chair. He was getting tired of sitting still. George gave his little brother a look. Louis tried to stop, but his legs kept moving. Charlotte sat like a small statue. Her back was straight. Her hands were folded in her lap. She watched everything with wide eyes. Charlotte loved the music and the bright colors. She thought the crown looked very heavy on her grandfather's head. King Charles stood up from the throne. He looked different now with the crown on. He seemed taller somehow, more like a king from a storybook. He walked slowly down the steps. The long red robe behind him was carried by helpers. The king walked past the front row where his family sat. He gave them a small nod. It was not proper for him to stop and talk during the ceremony, but his eyes told them he was glad they were there. William nodded back, father and son sharing a moment that few people could understand. Louis gave a big wave to his grandfather. Kate tried to stop him, but it was too late. Some people in the crowd smiled. Even King Charles's eyes showed a hint of a smile. Louis was too young to know all the rules. And sometimes his honest joy was just what these formal events needed. The ceremony continued with more singing and prayers. Louis started to get restless again. Kate reached into her small bag. She took out a tiny toy car. She handed it to Louis. He took it with a big smile. Now he had something to keep his hands busy. George watched the Archbishop read from a big book. He tried to hear every word. These were the same words that had been said at coronations for hundreds of years. Someday these words would be said about him. The thought made him sit up even straighter. Charlotte looked around at all the famous people. She spotted some faces she knew from television. There were kings and queens from Spain, Denmark, and Sweden. There were famous singers and actors too. They all wore their best clothes for this special day. A man in a special uniform walked by carrying a golden staff. Louis pointed at it with wide eyes. Kate bent down to whisper in his ear. She told him it was one of the crown jewels. It was very old and very special. Louis nodded, trying to understand. The ceremony began to move toward its end. The choir sang one last song. The sound was so beautiful it made Kate's eyes water. She quickly blinked away the tears. Royal family members did not cry in public, even when they were moved by something. William thought about his mother. Princess Diana had never seen her son grow up and marry. She had never met her grandchildren. On days like this, her absence felt very strong. William wished she could have been there to see her grandchildren looking so grown up. The Archbishop raised his hands. His voice rang out with the final blessing. Everyone in the abbey bowed their heads. Even the children knew to be extra quiet during this part. The abbey was silent except for the Archbishop's voice. When the blessing was done, King Charles stood. William knew what came next. His father would walk back down the aisle. Then the family would follow. They would go outside where thousands more people waited to see the newly crowned king. The children sat up straight, ready for their next big moment. They knew that walking out of the abbey would be even more important than walking in. Now they would be the family of the crowned king. King Charles began his walk down the center aisle. The crown sat firmly on his head. The long royal robe trailed behind him. Everyone in Westminster Abbey stood as he passed. This was an ancient tradition to show respect for the new king. William and Kate stood up with their children. They would follow the king, but at a distance. This would be the first time they walked as the family of the new king. William felt the weight of this moment. He was now the son of the king, one step closer to the throne himself. "Remember to walk slowly," Kate whispered to the children. "Just like we practiced." George nodded. He was ready. Charlotte stood tall, her small chin lifted. Louis bounced a little on his toes, but he tried to copy his siblings. The family stepped into the aisle. The eyes of everyone in the abbey turned to them. There were soft whispers as people pointed at the children. Many had not seen the young royals up close before. William and Kate walked side by side. They moved with calm grace. Years of royal duties had taught them how to carry themselves in public. Kate held Louis's hand to keep him walking at the right speed. William placed a gentle hand on George's shoulder. Charlotte walked between her brothers. She kept her eyes forward and her steps even. Sometimes she would turn her head slightly to smile at people she recognized. Her small waves were perfect. Louis tried his best to walk like George, but his legs were shorter, and he had to take quick steps to keep up. His bright eyes looked at everything. The colorful uniforms, the shiny swords of the guards, the big flower arrangements. He wanted to remember it all. As they walked, the great organ played. The music was grand and filled the abbey. Louis whispered something to Kate. She bent down to hear him better. Louis wanted to know if the music was magic. Kate smiled and told him it was just a very big instrument with many pipes. The family passed rows of important people. Everyone bowed their heads as William and the royal children walked by. This was a sign of respect for the future king and his family. Even presidents and prime ministers showed this respect. "Look, Mom," Charlotte whispered. "They are bowing to us." "They are showing respect for the royal family," Kate said softly. "Remember to nod back slightly." Charlotte gave a perfect small nod to the people they passed. She had been practicing this move for weeks. George did the same. Louis tried to copy them, but his nods were bigger and made some people smile. As they neared the doors of the abbey, the sunlight streamed in. It made the jewels on Kate's small tiara sparkle. The light also caught the golden buttons on William's uniform. The family seemed to glow as they approached the doorway. Outside, the sound of the waiting crowd grew louder. There were thousands of people hoping to see the royal family. The children looked at each other with excitement. This would be the biggest crowd they had ever faced. William paused just before the doors. He turned to his family. "This is an important moment," he said quietly. "When we step outside, we show the world the future of the royal family. Just be yourselves. That is what people want to see." Kate straightened George's tie one last time. She fixed a small curl on Charlotte's head. She made sure Louis's jacket was buttoned correctly. These small touches helped calm her own nerves. The great doors swung open wide. The noise of the crowd hit them like a wave. Cheers and clapping filled the air. Flags waved in the bright sunlight. The steps of the abbey were lined with royal guards in their red uniforms. William took a deep breath. Kate stood tall beside him. The children lined up in front of their parents. For a moment, they stood framed in the doorway of Westminster Abbey. The ancient building behind them, the future ahead of them. Then, as one family, they stepped forward into the sunlight. The crowd roared with approval. Cameras flashed like stars. This was the image that would be on front pages around the world. The royal family, elegant and united, stepping out to greet their people. George walked with purpose. Charlotte moved with grace. And Louis, youngest of them all, broke into a huge smile and waved with both hands. His innocent joy made the crowd cheer even louder. The family stood at the top of the steps of Westminster Abbey. Below them, a sea of people stretched as far as they could see. The crowd was a mix of colors as people waved flags from all over the world. The noise was incredible. Cheers and clapping filled the air. William and Kate paused to let the crowd see them. This was part of their royal duty, to be seen by the people, to connect with them, even from a distance. The children stood in front of their parents. They had practiced this moment, but the real thing was much bigger. George stood tall like his father. He gave small waves to the crowd. His face was serious but friendly. Even at his young age, he understood that he was showing people the future king. He took this job very seriously. Charlotte stood with perfect posture. Her small hand moved in the royal wave. Not too high, not too fast, just like her mother and grandmother had taught her. She smiled at the crowd with a sweet grace that made people call out her name. Louis was less controlled than his siblings. His waves were big and excited. Sometimes he used both hands at once. His smile was wide and real. When the crowd cheered extra loud, he jumped up and down with joy. Kate placed a gentle hand on his shoulder to calm him, but she was smiling too. Photographers stood in special areas. Their cameras clicked non-stop. They wanted to catch every moment, every smile, every wave. These pictures would be seen by millions of people around the world. "Look at all the people," Louis said in a loud voice. Some people in the front rows heard him and laughed. Louis was known for saying what he thought. It made him a favorite with the public. Kate bent down to speak to Louis. "Yes, there are lots of people. They are all here to see Grandpa become king. And to see us too." Louis nodded. Then he gave an extra big wave that made the crowd cheer again. Charlotte rolled her eyes a little at her younger brother, but she was smiling too. The family began to walk down the steps. Guards stood on both sides to keep them safe. William and Kate moved with careful steps. Kate held Louis's hand to make sure he did not run or trip. George and Charlotte walked with perfect royal posture. At the bottom of the steps, a line of important people waited to greet them. There were mayors and judges and military leaders. Each person bowed or curtsied as the royal family passed. William and Kate nodded back. The children copied their parents. Louis was getting tired now. The day had been long and exciting. He still smiled and waved, but Kate could tell he needed a break soon. She held his hand a little tighter and whispered words of praise to keep him going. The family walked toward the waiting cars. These would take them to Buckingham Palace for the next part of the day. There would be a special appearance on the palace balcony, the famous balcony where royal families had stood for over 100 years. People threw flowers as they walked. Small bunches of roses and daisies landed near their feet. Charlotte looked at them with longing. She loved flowers. A guard picked up a small bunch of pink roses and handed them to her. Her face lit up with happiness as she took them. The cars were big and black with the royal flag flying on the front. The doors were held open by drivers in special uniforms. William helped George into the first car. Kate guided Charlotte and Louis into their seats. The inside of the car was cool and quiet after the noise outside. As the doors closed, the family let out a big breath. They had done well. The first part of this historic day was complete. Now they could relax for the short drive to the palace. "You were all wonderful," William said to his children. His voice was full of pride. "Grandpa will be very happy when he hears how well you did." Louis bounced in his seat. "Did you see how many people were waving at us?" There were millions and billions. George smiled at his brother. Not quite that many, but a lot. Charlotte was carefully holding her flowers. A lady near the front was crying. Why was she crying if she was happy? "Sometimes people cry when they feel very strong emotions," Kate explained. "Happy or sad. Today is a historic day. Some people have waited their whole lives to see a coronation." The car moved slowly through the crowded streets. People were still waving and taking pictures as they passed. The children waved back through the windows. "Will we go on the balcony next?" George asked. He knew the schedule for the day. William nodded. "Yes. After Grandpa arrives at the palace, we will all go out on the balcony. There will be a special airplane show too." Louis's eyes grew wide. Airplanes. Real ones. His tiredness seemed to disappear at this news. "Yes, real ones," Kate said with a smile. "The Royal Air Force will fly over the palace. There will be colored smoke trails in the sky." "That will be the best part," Louis decided. His siblings nodded in agreement. The royal cars arrived at Buckingham Palace. The big gates opened to let them in. Guards in red uniforms stood at attention as they passed. The palace looked grand with all its flags flying. Today all the flags were new and bright for the coronation. Inside the palace, staff lined the halls. They bowed or curtsied as the family walked by. William and Kate nodded to them. The children tried to copy their parents. Even Louis remembered to give small nods to the people they passed. They were taken to a special room to wait. This large room had gold chairs and paintings of old kings and queens on the walls. Tall windows looked out over the palace gardens. A table held drinks and small snacks for the family. "Can I have a cookie?" Louis asked right away. He pointed to a plate of fancy cookies on the table. "Yes, but just one," Kate said. "We have to go on the balcony soon, and we need to stay clean." Louis took a cookie very carefully. He ate it while walking around the room looking at everything. Charlotte sat down on one of the gold chairs. She was still holding her flowers from outside. George went to the window to look at the crowds that filled the area in front of the palace. "There are even more people here," he told his father. William joined him at the window. "Yes, This is where the biggest crowds gather. They are waiting for the balcony appearance. That is a very important tradition. A palace worker came into the room. He told them that King Charles had arrived. The balcony appearance would happen in 10 minutes. Kate quickly checked the children. She wiped a cookie crumb from Louis's face. She fixed Charlotte's hair ribbon. She made sure George's medals were straight on his small chest. William's phone made a sound. He looked at it and smiled. "Your Uncle Harry has sent a message," he told the children. "He says he saw you on television, and you all looked wonderful." The children smiled. They did not get to see their uncle often since he lived in America now. It was nice to know he was watching them today. Another worker came to tell them it was time. The family followed her through the grand halls of the palace. They walked up a small flight of stairs. At the top was a set of tall glass doors. Through the doors, they could see the famous balcony. King Charles was already there. He stood tall with his crown still on his head. When he saw his grandchildren, his serious face broke into a warm smile. Louis ran to him right away. The others followed more slowly. "You were all perfect," Charles told them. He bent down despite his heavy robes to give each child a quick hug. "I could not have asked for a better family to support me today." William placed a hand on his father's shoulder. The two men shared a look that said more than words could. Father and son, king and future king. The line of succession standing together on this historic day. The palace worker gave them a signal. It was time to step onto the balcony. The glass doors were opened wide. The roar of the crowd hit them like a wave. There seemed to be people filling every space as far as they could see. King Charles stepped out first. The crowd cheered even louder when they saw the newly crowned king. William and Kate followed with the children. They lined up along the edge of the balcony, the whole royal family together for the world to see. The noise was so loud that Louis covered his ears at first. Kate bent down to comfort him. She whispered something that made him smile. He took his hands away and waved at the crowd instead. Charlotte stood between her brothers. She held her flowers in one hand and waved with the other. Her smile was bright in the afternoon sun. George stood tall next to his father. He waved with perfect royal form. William and Kate stood close together. They had done this many times before. They knew how to wave and smile just right. Not too excited, but warm and friendly. They looked like the perfect royal couple. The sound of airplanes came from the distance. The children looked up with excitement. First came large planes flying in perfect lines. They left trails of white smoke behind them. Then came faster jets that roared over the palace. The final planes were special. They left trails of red, white, and blue smoke across the sky, the colors of the British flag painted in the air above them. The crowd cheered as the colors spread across the blue sky. "Wow!" Louis shouted. His voice was so loud that people standing near the balcony heard him. They laughed and pointed at the young prince. Louis did not notice. He was too busy watching the airplanes with his mouth open in wonder. For several minutes, the family stood together on the balcony. They waved to the crowds. They pointed at the airplanes. They showed the world a united royal family. Strong, elegant, ready for the future. After the balcony appearance, the family went back inside Buckingham Palace. The public part of the day was over. Now came the private celebrations. King Charles had planned a special dinner for family and close friends. But before that, there was time to rest. The children were taken to a special room set up just for them. It had toys and books and comfortable chairs. A small television showed cartoons. There were more snacks on a low table. Louis ran straight to the toy cars lined up on the floor. "You have 1 hour to rest," Kate told them. "Then we need to get ready for the family dinner." Charlotte sat on a soft chair with her flowers. She was carefully arranging them in a better order. George picked up a book about airplanes. He wanted to learn more about the ones they had just seen flying over the palace. William and Kate left the children with their nanny. They went to another room where they could have some quiet time. Kate took off her small tiara and placed it carefully in its box. William removed his heavy jacket with all its medals. They both sat down with a sigh of relief. "The children were amazing today," Kate said. "Even Louis behaved so well." William smiled. "They made us proud." Father was very pleased with them too. A palace worker brought them tea. The hot drink was welcome after the long day. They sipped it slowly, talking about the ceremony and the crowds. These quiet moments together were rare on such busy royal days. In the children's room, Louis was making car noises as he pushed toy vehicles across the floor. He had changed out of his formal clothes into something more comfortable. His nanny had helped him into soft pants and a simple shirt. He looked more like a regular 5-year-old now. Charlotte was drawing a picture of the coronation. She had a good memory for details. Her drawing showed the abbey and the crown and all the important people. She was wearing a pretty dress, but had taken off her fancy shoes. George was still in his uniform, but had removed the tight collar. He lay on his stomach on the carpet, looking at his airplane book. Sometimes he made notes in a small notebook beside him. George liked to learn facts and remember them. The nanny brought them fruit and small sandwiches. The children had been too excited to eat much earlier in the day. Now they were hungry. Louis took 2 sandwiches at once, making the nanny smile and remind him to eat one at a time. "Did you see me wave to everyone?" Louis asked his siblings as he ate. "I waved the best." Charlotte shook her head. "You waved too fast. Mom says we should wave slowly and politely." "But people cheered louder when I waved my way," Louis said with his mouth full. George looked up from his book. "They cheered because you made them laugh, but Charlotte is right about the proper way to wave." Louis shrugged. He did not care about proper. He just wanted to have fun. In another part of the palace, William and Kate were getting ready for the evening event. Kate had changed into a new dress. This one was dark green with small diamonds on the shoulders. A hairdresser was fixing her hair into an elegant style. William put on a different uniform. This one was dark blue with a red sash across the chest. He pinned different medals to this jacket. A palace worker helped him make sure everything was perfect. "Do you think the children will manage the dinner?" William asked. "It will be quite late for them." "George and Charlotte will be fine," Kate said. "Louis might get tired, but it means a lot to your father to have all of them there." The hour of rest passed quickly. The nanny helped the children get dressed in their evening clothes. George wore a small suit. Charlotte had a pretty white dress with a green sash to match her mother. Louis wore a suit too, but kept reaching up to pull at the tight collar. The family met in the hallway. Kate bent down to straighten Louis's tie again. "Just a few more hours," she told him softly. "Then you can go to bed." Louis nodded, but he was already looking tired. It had been a very long day for a 5-year-old. Charlotte looked as fresh as she had in the morning. George was serious and ready for more royal duties. They walked together to the grand dining room. This huge room was lit by crystal chandeliers. The long table could seat 50 people. Tonight it was set with the best gold plates and cups. Flowers from the royal gardens filled the center of the table. King Charles was already there. He had changed into evening clothes and wore a smaller crown. This one was just for special dinners and events. He smiled when he saw his family. "Here they are," he said to the other guests. "The stars of the day." The children walked around the room, greeting people politely just as they had been taught. They shook hands and answered questions about the ceremony. Even Louis remembered to bow to the other kings and queens who had come for the dinner. "You must be very proud," a tall man said to William and Kate. He was the king of a northern country and had known William since he was a boy. "Very proud," William agreed. They understood the importance of the day. The children were seated near their parents at the table. Special high chairs had been brought in for Louis, so he could reach the table properly. The plates in front of them had the royal coat of arms painted in gold. The cups were crystal and very old. Louis looked at all the forks and spoons with wide eyes. "Which one do I use?" he whispered to Charlotte. "Start from the outside and work in," she told him. She had been practicing table manners for weeks before this day. The royal dinner lasted several hours. Servants in formal uniforms brought many courses of food. There was soup in gold bowls, fish on silver plates, meat with vegetables grown in the palace gardens, and finally, fancy desserts that made the children's eyes grow wide. Despite the late hour, the children behaved well. George sat tall in his chair and spoke politely to the adults near him. Charlotte tried each food with perfect manners. Louis grew tired but managed to stay awake. He only spilled his water once, and a servant quickly cleaned it up. King Charles stood up to give a speech. Everyone in the room fell silent. The king spoke about his mother, the late queen, and how she had taught him about duty and service. He thanked all the people who had worked to make the coronation happen, and he spoke about the future of the royal family. "Today we saw the past, present, and future of our monarchy," he said, looking at William and the children. "I am blessed to have such a family to carry on these traditions." William felt a swell of pride at his father's words. Kate reached under the table to squeeze his hand. They both knew that someday it would be William sitting in that chair as king. And after him, young George. When the dinner was finally over, it was very late. Louis was almost asleep in his chair. Kate picked him up, not caring that queens and presidents could see her acting like any mother with a tired child. Charlotte leaned against William's side, fighting to keep her eyes open. Only George still looked alert, though his face was a bit pale with tiredness. "I think we need to get these young royals to bed," William said to his father. King Charles nodded. "They have earned their rest. They were perfect today. The public loved them." The family said their goodbyes to the important guests. Even in their tired state, the children remembered to thank people for coming. They had been taught that good manners were always important, no matter how you felt. William carried Charlotte, while Kate carried Louis. George walked beside them through the palace halls. The grand rooms were quiet now. Most of the staff had gone home. Only a few guards and night workers remained. "Did we do well today, Dad?" George asked as they walked. His voice was serious even though he was only 9. William looked down at his son. Sometimes he forgot how young George still was. The boy carried such a big future on his small shoulders. "You did better than well," William told him. "You made history today. People will remember how the royal children behaved at the coronation for many years." George smiled, pleased with this answer. Charlotte, half asleep in William's arms, gave a small smile too. Louis was already asleep against Kate's shoulder. They reached the royal nursery where the children would sleep. This large room had 3 beds with special canopies over them. The walls were painted with scenes from storybooks. Though the children had their own rooms at home, on special occasions like this, they stayed in the historic nursery, where royal children had slept for hundreds of years. Nannies helped the children change into pajamas. Louis did not even wake up as he was changed and placed in his bed. Charlotte fell asleep as soon as her head touched the pillow. George stayed awake a little longer, asking questions about the next day. "Will we go home tomorrow?" he wanted to know. "Yes," Kate told him. "Back to our own house. Back to school for you on Monday." George nodded. He liked the idea of going back to normal life. Even princes needed regular days sometimes. William and Kate tucked the children in, making sure they were comfortable. They turned off the main lights, leaving only a small lamp glowing softly. They stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at their sleeping children. "They really were amazing today," Kate whispered. William nodded. "They understand duty already, even Louis in his own way." They closed the door quietly and walked to their own rooms. The day had been long for them too. Tomorrow, they would return to their home and their regular royal duties. But today would stay in their memories forever. In the quiet palace, the children slept deeply. Charlotte dreamed of flowers and music. George dreamed of airplanes and crowns. Louis dreamed of waving to thousands of people who cheered when they saw him. Outside, London was still celebrating. Lights shone on the palace walls. Flags still flew from buildings. People were still talking about the coronation and the royal family. Many mentioned how well the children had behaved, how George looked so grown up, how Charlotte was so poised, how Louis made everyone smile with his excitement. The newspapers were already printing their front pages for the next day. Most had chosen the same picture. The royal family standing on the steps of Westminster Abbey, William and Kate looking proud. The children in front of them, waving to the crowds. The new king's family, perfect in every way. In the morning, these papers would be delivered across the country and around the world. People everywhere would see the royal family in their finest moment. The images would become part of history, looked at for many years to come. But for now, in the quiet of the night, they were just a family sleeping after a big day. The children who had waved to crowds and met kings and queens were now just sleeping children, tired from their adventures. The parents who had shown the world the perfect royal couple were now just a mother and father, grateful that their children had done so well. Tomorrow would bring new duties and responsibilities. But tonight, they rested, having shown the world the true meaning of royal elegance, not just in their fine clothes or perfect ways, but in their unity as a family, in their dedication to duty, and in their love for each other that shone through every moment of this historic day.